Hi, Booktube. So as I was sitting down here thinking about the different videos I wanted to film, I realized I haven't done a wrap-up of any of the books I've read so far this year. So I thought I would do a winter wrap-up of the books I've read. So far, I've read 25 books, and I'm not going to be sharing all of them with you, but I wanted to feature some of my favorites or some of like the standout books that I've read so far. And I know for some people, 25 books sounds like a lot for 2 months, but for me, it's not very much at all. I think I've alluded to a couple of times how there's things going on in the background where I haven't had the mental fortitude to read because I've had so much going on. You know, things are looking up and things are starting to smooth out. I don't want to get into any detail because none of these things are settled yet. There's so much like open-ended conclusions here on what's going on. So I don't want to start explaining something and then a month later it's all different and I have to, re-explain it. So I don't want to tease you, but I just haven't had the time or the energy to read that much, which is odd for me because normally I can just dive into a book and get lost, but there's so much pressing on me that I just haven't had the energy. But I have managed to read the 25 books, and then I'm going to save my March books to do a actual March month wrap up. But for January and February, let's see, I'll start with the physical books that I've read, and let me see here. Okay, so we'll start with these like two random books. I know Ollie over at Command Ollie was doing a because he hosts in August like reading garbage books, like the like trashy like throwaway books, and so he does that in August. But then he was doing a weekend event. So I read A Sweet Valley University. It's like a spinoff series for the Sweet Valley High, and I managed to find book one. I believe this is at maybe a thrift store. I can't remember. But since I had book one, but I'm nowhere finished rereading the Sweet Valley High series, like why not just jump ahead to this one? And for anyone who's read the different series, there's like the Sweet Valley Twins was when they were much younger in middle school, I think. And there's the high school, there's senior year of high school, and then there's the university series. And the tone of this book is much different than the high school series, and maybe it's just because they're getting older, but things change like right away with the different couples that are that go from the high school to university. They're already from book one. Everything that was settled in the high school years is completely changed now, and so I thought that was interesting. I read this way back when I was in high school myself, but I didn't remember much, so happy to read that. And then I read another book from the 80s. I think this came out in the 80s. Let me see here. 83. This is A Sweet Dreams, number 32. I didn't read these when I mean, I was just a little kid in the 80s, but I didn't read these when I was in high school or middle school. Maybe because like these had been out for so long at that point. But when I was looking at the description here, there are so many books in this series. There's up to 72 at this point when this book came out. And I guess each of them feature a different character. And this is about Lisa. She grows up in Hollywood and is moving to stay with her grandmother in somewhere in Northern California, I want to say. But because her parents are busy being Hollywood stars or busy overseas on trips, and so she stays with her grandma, and she's constantly daydreaming about different things, or how like the grass is always green on the other side kind of thing, like dreaming about what is, but then like adding all these embellishments and things like that. So this was a fun, lighthearted read. And then the other physical book I wanted to talk about is Love, Ruby Lavender by Deborah Wiles. I have seen this book so many times in used bookstores and thrift stores. It's just one of those, I don't know, maybe it's the cover or like the writing is how I'm always picking this up, constantly seeing it. So I was like, why not actually read it? And this book was so charming to me. There is, let's see here, there's letter entries between Ruby and her grandmother. She lives in small town Mississippi, and was it Mississippi or was it Alabama? Yeah, Hallelujah, Mississippi. And her grandmother decides to go to Hawaii to visit her her grandson or her granddaughter, and because the daughter was just born, and so she wants to go over there to Hawaii, and she needs a break from the small town because her husband just died, and she's like a new to that lifestyle, and so she is sending letters back and forth to Ruby, and so Ruby is having a hard time adjusting to being by herself. She has her mother there in the small town. She's not completely left to babysitters or something like that, but her grandmother plays a huge influence in her life. And so this is very funny in a way, because it starts out, the very first bit is the grandmother and her before the grandmother leaves for Hawaii. They go and steal these chickens from a chicken farm where they're going to be used for meat. And so they steal them, and she's taking care of them, and they're constantly hatching eggs, and the chickens are constantly running everywhere and getting Ruby in trouble. So there's a lot of humor involved in here, and it was just like a touching book. And then as far as some ebooks that I wanted to talk about, the very first book I read in January, the first of the year, was The Good Rain Across Time and Terrain in the Pacific Northwest by Timothy Egan. I read several of Timothy Egan books, and this was his very first, I want to say it was the very first book that he published. After that, he seems to focus more on history, and this does focus on history mixed with like current day and his thoughts on the Pacific Northwest, because he himself lives in Seattle, and so he goes from like Seattle to all the different parts in Washington, Oregon. I can't remember if he goes to Canada as well, but it was just like fun to read about, the place where I live. And I just want to I don't know, put it out there, like for anyone that maybe you've never lived away, you've always lived near, the one area. I just think it's so fun to read books or history books or, geology and, nature books and all of that about your specific area, because I just found it's so enlightening, and it makes you like the place where you live all the more. So I wanted to touch on that one. And then I read the last book in, what is the series called? But this one is City in Ruins, and the first book is City on Fire. Maybe it's the City on Fire series by Don Winslow. This is a new to me author, but this is the last book in the series, and it was fantastic. It's not my normal type of book. This is a mob story about a man who is starting out in Rhode Island. There's different mafia groups, and then he goes to California and then Las Vegas, and he's moving around, but he's trying to get away from that background. He's trying to break away and be a better person. So that's how I was able to like the character, because they don't always make the best choices, and they aren't hanging out with the best people or things like that, but they seem to have a good heart and the end of things, and want to do good. So that's how I was able to to make my peace with it, because I'm not like Sopranos and there's others kind of TV shows and movies. They're not my cup of tea at all. I don't care for them. So, but the writing in this is steals the show. I feel like even if you, like me, don't read or watch these kind of mafia crime stories, the writing is just was fantastic. It just sweeps you away, and you just can't stop reading. And so I wanted to recommend this series. And then going back to nonfiction, I read by Ben Goldfarb, Crossings: How Road Ecology is Shaping the Future of Our Planet. I read his previous book, the Eager Beaver, or Eager, and it's a long subtitle like this one is. But that was fantastic. This one didn't measure up, to the Eager Beaver book, but it was still really good. And you wouldn't think a book about the United States road system and how the different roads are built, and why these different roads are there, and things like that would be interesting, or the different things that are happening alongside the road. But it was funny enough. But it talks about how there's different birds too. When you compare the birds that nest and live, generation after generation, right near different highways and things like that, compared to birds that live out in the forest, how they're the same species, that their wings are different lengths so that they can zip quicker and not get hit by cars and things like that. So I thought stuff like that was fascinating. And then I kind of already knew this, but it was stating how the number one road builder in America is, you know, the lumber company, the timber companies, because the forest, you know, the forest companies, because they have to go in, they have to build these roads to go into all these different wilderness areas, to cut down all the trees. And so I thought that was very interesting as well. But I recommend, you know, giving this book a go. And then let's see here, I have The Luckiest Girl by Beverly Cleary. I read this in February for, you know, like Valentine's Day, and Beverly Cleary, you know, mostly wrote, you know, children's books, middle grade books, you know, Beverly Cleary and the Henry Huggins series. But this is following a young woman who, or young girl, she is, I think, 15 or 16, and it kind of mimics Beverly Cleary's real life, because when she was graduating high school, she went down to California to go to college for the first couple of years. And in this one, in the story, the main character is going from Portland, leaving her parents while in high school to stay with her family. I think it was her aunt in Southern California, so a very much different climate. And the character hadn't been there before, and so she like is immediately falling in love with all of the newness of California. And so all these people in the small town take everything they see for granted, but she's like, oh, she's just riveted by everything. She's always finds a joy in those little moments. And so I thought that was very endearing. And there is a love story in here, because, you know, she is like a 15 or 16-year-old girl in high school, and so she falls in love with a boy. But Beverly Cleary does not pull any punches. Because it ends, and it doesn't end like you would think it's not sappy, is what I'll say. It doesn't end as you would think a book about young teenagers would. So I really liked that. And then another book, the last book I want to talk about, is one I also read for Valentine's Day in February, and that is a book by Terry Wilson. It's a Harlequin special edition, Her Man of Honor. And this series, I think, had a name to it, but I can't remember what the name of it was. But this story, I've read many of Terry Wilson's books, because she writes like what is it called? Like the sweeter romances. Like there's no sexual content at all, which is like my preferred romance style. And so she writes a lot of like the charming books, like they're like rom-coms in a way often, I feel like, where like you're and that kind of thing, but they're very like girly girls often too. And I think that reflects the author. She likes that kind of like, you know, pink and tulle and Tiffany's, you know, this talks about the main character works for a wedding magazine. And so she's constantly referencing Breakfast at Tiffany's and things like that, because she's in New York and loves all the fashion and stuff. But anyway, the whole storyline is things that I normally would drop this book like a hot potato so fast, because she's getting married, and the groom leaves her. It's not a spoiler, but he decides to leave her at the altar, doesn't get married, and so she runs to her hotel room crying, and then has a relationship with her man of honor. Her best friend is a man that she met in college, and so she's always looked at him as just a friend, and so he goes by to console her. And then there is an unexpected pregnancy, and this isn't any spoilers. This is like in the back of the book, but so that whole thing, I would be immediate like, I am not reading this book. Like, I don't like anything about these actions, but somehow Terry Wilson manages to pull it off. I don't read unexpected pregnancy or pregnancy books in general, or romance books, because I don't like that kind of dynamic of how the story goes, or like, and it's not insta love, because they were friends before, but it is in a way, because she had never considered him that way. It was more of just like a consoling her, and yeah. So anyway, all that to be said, this book was really good. It was really cute. If you can get past that first part, but yeah, even that first part was, you were able to I don't know, it wasn't too cringy. And even the whole like secret pregnancy, I liked how she didn't keep that from him for too long, because I have read a few books where that's the storyline, and I just can't stand it. I can't stand the lack of communication, and that being the whole plot line of the book, of her like not revealing that to the father of the child. So yeah, so anyway, this was actually really good, and I do want to read the other books in this series. It's following, I think it's going to be following the different people at the wedding magazine that work there. And so yeah, this is yeah, any of Terry Wilson's writing, I feel like it has that cute demeanor, like a cotton candy, like at the fair, you know, with a couple meets and that kind of feel to her stories. So anyway, those are some of the books I read in January and February. Let me know if you've read any of these, and I'll be sure to do a monthly wrap-up in March, so it won't go too long without talking about the books I've read. So anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.